to Square Off. I'm Mark Hebscher. This fall, it's expected that there will be 90,000 first-year undergraduate students attending universities in Ontario. That is the highest number ever. And according to the Council of Ontario Universities, this parallels a trend of increased demand for post-secondary graduates in the workforce. They say that 2 out of 3 new jobs require post-secondary education. And from 2004 to 2010, employment growth for university graduates outpaced all other levels of education. So to help students navigate the university environment, the Council decided to develop a website, myeducationhasvalue.ca. They say it was designed to provide students with resources that can help them secure financial assistance and take advantage of emerging employment trends. But the Canadian Federation of Students is warning people about the site. They say it is trying to mask the effect that rising tuition fees and student debt can have on the quality of life. Joining us now from our Queen's Park studio to talk more about this is the chairperson of the Students' Federation, Sandy Hudson. Next to her, the president of the Council of Ontario Universities, Bonnie Patterson. Sandy, why warn students about this website? What's the problem here?
We're concerned that some of the messages it puts out aren't quite true and kind of glosses over some of the issues that students are facing. When we're talking about a website that's saying that when you go into debt, when you come out of school, you're going to be able to pay that all off because you're going to make it all back, we're ignoring some of the very real issues that are facing students today. Students are paying the highest tuition fees that they ever have in this province, the highest in Canada, and are going into more and more debt than they ever have. And what we're seeing here is this idea that students are going to be making more money comes from a system of the past where the government was paying over 80% of a student's education, and right now that's not the case. They're paying less than 50% in some cases, and students are paying more and more of their education, and that's going to have devastating effects on whether or not they're able to pay it off as they enter the workforce with a debt sometimes totaling larger than what a mortgage-sized debt would be.
Okay, Bonnie, there's some truth to that. Are there untruths on the website? It's called myeducationhasvalue.ca. Are you misleading students? Are you telling them things that maybe not telling them the entire truth here?
Well, our perspective is that you need to provide information and resources to students, whether it's about access to financial aid or job trends in the future, debt and tips to be able to manage better through the process for those students that do have debt. So we think providing information at this very exciting time when students are starting their school studies is important. The more information, the better.
Sandy, you say that the site tells students that assuming tens of thousands of dollars in debt, it's okay because after you graduate, you're going to make all that money back and then some. True?
It's not the case.
It's not the case. So you're telling me that it's not the case when someone graduates that they're going to make 50% more than someone who graduated from high school.
Well, let's take a look at how the information is framed. The way that it looks at that information, the study from where that information comes from, puts all students into one lump sum. So it's talking about students who are wealthy, whose parents are wealthy, who didn't have to pay for school at all. And if we're talking about them saying that when they go to school and they become doctors and lawyers, they're going to benefit from that education, of course they are. From students who are going to school while also having 3 jobs, taking out $40,000 in debt, which is the average right now is $37,000, they're going to be, with that debt for the rest of their lifetime as they're paying that off. And that's not something that these studies that are looking at that information now are looking at information from students who are in school during the 90s, during the 80s, and that's not something that those students have had to go through. We're at a very different time in post-secondary education, and it's going to have severe impacts for our economy and for those students' ability to be economically mobile in the same way that students in the past were.
All right, Sandy, that's an excellent point. If there's an average of $37,000 in debt for students, do you need to be more upfront about that possibility and how to deal with it on your website?
Well, I think you first of all have to look at the various statistics that are out there. That's one figure. You can look at national survey data that would suggest the average debt this past year was $26,000.
But even so, that's a fair bit of money, whether it's $26,000 or $37,000.
There's no question. Almost 50% of students graduate with no debt. For the 50+% of students that graduate with debt, it obviously varies. But at the same time, we've got current data on employment. We know, for example, that within 6 months of graduating, in the height of recession in 2008, those graduates with university degrees still had a 92% plus placement rate, with over 85% of those students saying that their education was very relevant to their job. We know 2 years out after that, that rate goes higher. We know there are many occupations and professions where there's 100% placement. So, 90+% placement, average salaries increasing year over year for a fresh university graduate. There's data that supports the ability to pay, but at the same time, universities are investing hugely in their students to help those that are in the greatest needs. And there's no question. That's why the information on the website around financial assistance, how to manage the debt, tips for that big transition going to university and the independence that it brings, all of that's important to put in front of students very early on.
Okay, so Sandy, on the website, as Bonnie mentioned, you've got, learning how to manage debt and save money, learning about financial aid options available. Would the website, in your opinion, if they made a couple of changes, if they made the fact that debt was a little more important, would you be okay with the rest of the website in giving the students the tools that they need to reduce the amount of debt, or at least be able to handle it, manage that debt over a period of time? Would you be okay with a couple of changes there, or are you against the website entirely?
Well, here's my concern. I think that students have a lot of access to information when it comes to these issues. There's financial aid departments at each of the institutions that are typically where students go for this type of information. It seems to me that this release in the website that the COU has released is more or less just a kind of pat on the back to the government, which I understand that the COU does receive a lot of money from the government, and so would like to pat them on the back, but not at the expense of students. I think that is wrong, and what they should be doing is coming with students and asking the government for more funding for access to education, because the real problems here are high tuition fees,
right,
and that needs to be addressed by the government, and we would hope that our institutions' presidents would think the same.
All right, well, I hope when we go off the air, you two can speak privately and perhaps make a few changes so that everybody's happy. Thanks so much, Sandy Hudson and Bonnie Patterson, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, another celebrity is turning heads after dropping pounds, but will the comedian's career suffer as a result? We'll talk about whether or not people lose their funny bones when they lose their weight.